right. All right. Let me try that again. Hey, everybody. It's Friday, April 8th. This is Tim Ashe with my daily update on Vermont's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Going to briefly begin by saying that there's snow in the forecast, and normally it's always like every year when you think that the winter is over, ready for spring, warm weather, usually Vermont gets nailed by one more snowstorm and it makes everyone go into a funk. I mention it now because with everything else that's going on, for people who don't react well to this kind of seasonal stuff in the first place, it's really important that you check in on them if you think of it tomorrow. It's supposed to maybe happen tonight. It said something like 1 to 2 inches possible in New Hampshire. They're saying 6 to 12. So it's a good reminder with all that's going on. Please check in with people if you suspect that they might have a harder time dealing with what feels like a little bit of a bad joke of a snowfall here on May 8th. Second update, I was in Williston today, visited the site where Vermont Guard members and volunteers were distributing MREs, meals ready to eat, to Vermonters. They had expected to receive about 300 households coming through. And when I was there at about 10:45, they were up over 200 already. So I don't know what the final numbers were, but it really does goes to show how many people, because of unemployment and all the other things, are struggling to meet their basic needs. And it goes to show how much Vermont and the people who live here have banded together to make sure people's basic needs are being met. As you know, I had Rob Meehan, who runs Feeding Chittenden, on a couple weeks ago. And I've told you about my visit to the Guard Surge Medical Facility in Essex and just all the amazing work people have done to come together, really making up the rules as we go to make sure that people's needs are met. Today at Allenbrook School in Williston was another good example. In addition to the Guard members, there were a number of non-military people there who were participating, including Jane Helmstetter from our Agency of Human Services. So just a really great coming together, good spirit, and the people who were picking up MREs for their families were obviously very grateful. So it was really great to watch. I did not get in the way, but I was really glad to see it. Also, it's Teacher Appreciation Week. I've always thought these kinds of weeks are, I don't know, my mother was a teacher for her whole career. So I've always thought it's strange to appreciate them just the 1 week a year, but I get the point of such a week. And so if you didn't watch yesterday's video with Luke Dorfman, who is a Winooski High School teacher, and Hussein Amuri, who is a really fantastic student, a junior at Winooski, I hope you'll check it out. Both of them talked about what it's like to face distance learning and have the school year interrupted in such an abrupt way and having to shift on a dime. Hussein is also a track athlete, and he talked a little bit about what it's like to miss some of those normal things that for many high school age kids, and hope you'll check that out. It really, if we're going to have a 1 week where we appreciate teachers, and it's going to be this one, I hope you'll watch the video so you'll really get a sense of how remarkable our teaching workforce and all the other support staff in our public education system have been to try to continue education under difficult circumstances. I'm going to turn now to a couple of the updates from governor's modifications of the executive orders for stay-at-home in the state of emergency. And this is what I'll focus on for the remainder of our time. And it really falls into two categories. The first is guidance issued 2 days ago under the moniker Play Smart and Play Safe. Some of my soccer teammates will tell me to play smart when I've made an errant pass, but this, I think, is intended in a different way of playing smart. And I'll try not to get too technical about what the executive order does, but we'll try to put it in terms that are useful for most people's activities. The first overarching point that I think is worth making about the governor's executive order is it still maintains that gatherings up can be no larger than 10 people. And so when people hear outdoor recreation is being opened up and some outdoor sports and fitness, you often associate those with larger groups, but the requirements are still that the gatherings be 10 or fewer, which says something about the kind of activities that are being encouraged. And while those are in place, all of the other public health requirements continue to be there, including social distancing of at least 6 feet, not participating in any of these activities if you're not feeling well or if you've been around someone who's not feeling well, frequent hand washing and facial covering for those activities when you're around other people. So that's the sort of overarching size of outdoor recreation and outdoor fitness that's being permitted. And now I'll get a little bit more specific about what kind of activities are envisioned. So you may ask, does this mean that the lake monsters are going to be open? The answer is no. It doesn't mean that high school sports are being permitted. A lot of those kinds of team sports things are not what are in the governor's executive order. I'm going to now list what was included in the governor's order, but as someone who's served in the legislature, we often use the language that says including but not limited to, which means I'm about to give you a list of things that are permitted, but there may be others that aren't on the list. So it's a little confusing, and it means that if there's an outdoor activity or outdoor fitness that is not on this list, it may be permissible, but would require consultation with the Department of Health. So what the governor has said is opened up for business, so to speak, is outdoor recreation, outdoor fitness, including but not limited to the following: state and municipal parks. I know that skate parks and things like that had been closed, so those would be open. Recreation associations, many of you might have a better idea of what that means than me. I think we'll have to figure that one out. Trail networks, many public trail systems and trail systems on private lands had been closed. Those are now being made, are opening up. Things like the Long Trail, Catamount Trail, and others are open again, still with the social distancing requirements. Golf courses, guided expeditions, and I think that would typically be river trips and things like that. And big game check stations. I'm not sure what is in season for hunting right now, but big game check stations are allowed to be open. All of these continue to require the employees to have the exact same public health requirements that had been in place before. So it is not to say that everything goes back to the way it was at golf courses or on trails. You still have to be following all of the extra above and beyond precautions. One thing in the governor's order that I'm, to be honest, if I were writing the executive order, I would have done different. It still merely encourages the public use of masks. It doesn't require them. I believe strongly that either everyone should have to wear them or we feel safe enough that not everyone should have to wear them. But I think it creates a problem both between individuals, one who wears a mask, the other who doesn't, and wondering why the other person's putting your health at risk. It also puts store owners in the awkward position of having to decide if they want to have a policy or not that requires it. So it is what it is. It's the governor's emergency powers, and he is still encouraging the public use of masks, not requiring it. However, businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies can require masks for any person who comes into a business or an organization or a town, city, or state office. So we've already seen some stores requiring masks as a condition of entering that particular facility. I suspect there will be more who, when they choose to open up, are going to require masks. But it's something that will be driven by the facility operator, him or herself. Also, with this outdoor recreation, outdoor fitness set of measures, there's some new instructions for how that ought to play out. One is that they require this, what their tagline is, arrive, play, leave, meaning that anyone, let's take the golf course example. If someone shows up at a golf course, they're not to show up, hang out, play golf, then tailgate in the parking lot and generally congregate. They're there to recreate, play golf safely and with distancing, and then go back home. The same with trails, rather than picnicking and doing all sorts of things that we would do under normal circumstances. It's arrive, safely recreate, get back in your vehicle or however you got there, and go back home. The other, and this is going to be a tricky one, especially in communities that are on our state's borders, is that these recreation facilities are only open for Vermonters and those who have now quarantined in Vermont for the full 14 days. So if someone has a family member come stay with them in Vermont, they have to quarantine for 14 days before they would be allowed to access any of the recreational facilities that are choosing to open. There is going to be some kind of registration policy so that if you're going to golf, you're confirming that you're either a Vermonter or you have already been quarantined for 14 days after entering the state from somewhere else. So these will be some awkward discussions that people will have when they go to recreate, but that's the price of public health. They are also going to require that facilities that open up eliminate as many of the transactions that require people touching stuff as possible. So they would prefer that you get entrance tickets or pay charges and things remotely rather than doing it using a terminal at the inside a golf clubhouse or at a welcome center or something like that. Also have to remove as many of the high contact surfaces as possible. So if there's a welcome center where people come in to register and normally there would be places to rest, they're going to be removing virtually everything, or they're supposed to be removing virtually everything, so people aren't putting their hands on things, then the next person comes in, touches the same thing, and the infection spreads. I think you get the picture. And then also that any of the facilities that open and have to close spaces requiring in-person services. So if you have mountain bike trails, for instance, at a ski facility, the dining hall would not be able to be open, or the dining facilities. The bar would not be able to be open. Pro shops and gear shops would not be allowed to open the way they normally would. They could continue to do quote unquote curbside service if people were purchasing things from outside and then being delivered those items while still outside. But it's not a complete license for recreational entities to go back to normal. It is allowing people to utilize their facilities in very restricted ways, but giving people a chance to get out. And I think that's probably a good thing. But again, all of those entities that will start back up are required to have all of the workplace safety elements that have been in place now for the last 2 months, including a requirement that all employees, before the place turns the lights back on, that all employees are trained in all of the public health considerations that COVID-19 has brought. So if you're an employee who's now being asked to go back to work because your facility is opening up and you're not being offered any training, that's a problem. You should tell the supervisor that that's required, and it's doing them a favor too, so that they don't get shut down, which will happen if they don't follow the rules. And I think one of the most important things about all of that is that the governor and his team have clearly said that the continued easing of restrictions is only going to be as good as our public health numbers allow. And in our neighboring state of New Hampshire, the governor of New Hampshire is often he's a very optimistic person. He's always talking about how perfect everything is in New Hampshire. Last week, I mentioned that the rate of doubling of positive tests in New Hampshire was every 3 weeks. That's actually accelerated to every 2 weeks. So in Vermont, positive test rates are anticipated to double in 12 weeks. In New Hampshire, it went from 3 to 2 weeks, so going in the wrong direction. We share a long border with New Hampshire, which means that these precautions about prohibiting people from crossing over to play golf or to be on our trails is because we're not an island, and we could easily see a spread of infection of people coming across the border into our state. So while we want to keep good relations with our neighbors, we also have to be mindful that our public health measures, which have been very aggressive, we can't toss them out the window at a moment's notice because we're afraid to ask someone to register at the sign-in desk. So that comes with the territory. Now, last thing for the week. Today, the governor made an announcement, a couple announcements really, about childcare facilities, summer camps, and schools. Each of these made good headlines, and I don't mean that in I'm not picking a fight with the governor, but there's a lot of headlines about what was said, but the details are really still to follow in each of the three instances. So I'll start with childcare. The governor today said that childcare facilities, not just those providing care to essential workers, can open beginning June 1. However, the guidelines for how that will be done safely and what will be allowed has not yet been issued. So that will probably be forthcoming sometime next week. There will likely be capacity restrictions. So a childcare facility that usually serves 25 kids, it may not be allowed to do that, in which case opening June 1st might not be a financial reality. How kids will be separated. Right now, they have to have no fewer than 10 in one space, social distancing, how that's going to be accomplished in a childcare setting once that spigot is opened, much more hard to determine at the moment. But I know that for many working parents, the prospect of having your normal childcare facility back up and running is a sign of a very positive sign indeed. And so look for more guidance next week, and I'll share what I find out when I find out. Summer camps, also something that many parents are particularly worried about because that is a form of care for many working age parents over the course of the summer. Also allowed to open for the summer are day camps, not overnight camps, but day camps. Again, guidance has not yet been issued, but I think it was important for the governor to signal one way or the other while camps are making decisions about whether to preemptively to cancel for the season. So right now, if you're a summer camp, rather than make the decision perhaps prematurely to send messages to all the potential enrollees that you're canceling, it gives you a chance to think about how you can do it safely. The state will be issuing guidance about how camps can operate, but for many parents, it's good news, and I encourage you to contact the camps you're thinking about sending your kids and ask if they're planning about how they can open most safely. The third item that was discussed today by the governor and his team was about end of year school celebrations. This was not quite the announcement I was hoping for, but in the short term, I think it's probably the realistic one. What the Secretary of Education has issued as guidance to all of the schools in the state is that gatherings, the restriction on gatherings of up to 10 includes school year celebrations, making for most schools the idea of an in-person graduation held in any conventional way not likely, but has encouraged schools to be creative and think about ways that either virtually or in some other method, graduation ceremonies and celebration of the end of year for students can be conducted safely. Why I said that I wish it had been a little bit more is I still believe, and now I will follow up formally now that we have this guidance, I still believe that the Agency of Education ought to say very, very, very clearly to every school district that there will be an in-person graduation ceremony at one point. It may be that diplomas need to be handed out through some kind of virtual ceremony this school year in order to allow kids to move on for the summer and fall with whatever is going to come next for them. However, I still think that an in-person graduation is an absolutely vital milestone in kids' lives, and I'm really determined that kids will have the opportunity to walk in a graduation ceremony if they choose to. And I think probably either Thanksgiving weekend or the winter holiday break would be an occasion where many kids return if they've left the state, and would all be able to celebrate together, even if it has been on a bit of a time delay of about 6 months. So I'll continue working with the Agency of Education on that because I feel very strongly about it. I think it's something that people have should experience, and obviously with the caveat that it has to be safe to do so. So that's the end of the week wrap. Thanks for joining me, and really, really want to say how much I was moved to watch all the volunteers today at Allen Brook School in Williston who were handing out MREs, meals ready to eat, to families who needed that food badly. So to all the people who are out there volunteering, I tip my cap to you, and keep up the great work. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week.